David was a man who had everything. He was the CEO of a huge company, a billionaire with power, influence, and a sharp mind for business. His life was full of luxury, expensive cars, big offices, and fancy dinners. But on this chilly evening, David was not at his office. He sat at a corner table in a well-known restaurant in the city, preparing for one of the most important dinners of his life. Across the table, his assistant arranged papers carefully. Tonight, David had to meet some big investors to secure a deal worth $5 billion. It was a deal that could take his company to the next level, and he wanted everything to be perfect. The restaurant was busy, filled with quiet conversations and the soft clinking of glasses. The lights were warm, and the air smelled of fresh bread and roasted meat. Among the staff, Sarah was moving carefully between tables. Sarah was a young woman with a gentle smile and bright eyes. She worked hard as a waitress to support her family, always doing her best to treat customers with kindness and respect. When Sarah reached David's table, she greeted him politely. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you anything to start?" she asked, holding the menu. David glanced up quickly, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "I don't have time to waste," he said coldly. "Just bring me the steak, medium rare. And make sure it's done right." Sarah nodded, hiding a small hurt behind her calm expression. She had heard many kinds of customers, but something about David's tone felt harsher than usual. Still, she wanted to do her job well. "Of course, sir. I'll be right back with your order." As Sarah walked away, David's assistant leaned over and whispered, "Remember, this dinner is important. Stay focused." David nodded. The weight of the evening pressed down on him. His thoughts were racing, filled with numbers, plans, and expectations. He was used to being in control, and tonight was no different. A few minutes later, Sarah returned with the steak, placing the plate carefully in front of David. "Here is your steak, sir. I hope you enjoy it." David looked at the plate briefly and frowned. "Is this really medium rare? It looks more cooked than I asked." Sarah looked confused but polite. "I asked the chef to prepare it as you requested, sir. If you want, I can ask them to make a new one for you." David's eyes narrowed. "Don't waste my time. Just tell the chef to get it right next time." His voice was sharp and impatient. The other customers nearby could hear the exchange. Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but she stayed calm. She turned and walked away quietly, her hands trembling just a little. Behind the scenes, David's assistant watched carefully. "You don't have to be like this," she whispered later when Sarah passed by. "You deserve better than his attitude." Sarah smiled weakly but said nothing. She had learned not to argue with rude customers. It was better to keep her job and stay professional. The dinner continued, but the tension in the room was thick. David was distracted, his anger and stress showing more with every passing minute. He checked his phone often, answering calls with sharp words. Sarah noticed. She brought water, refilled glasses, and checked if anyone needed anything. She tried to keep her distance but couldn't help overhearing some of the conversation at the table. One of the men with David asked, "Is everything okay here?" David waved his hand. "Fine. Just tired." But it wasn't fine. His mood affected the whole room. When the dessert came, David barely touched it, his mind still on the deal and the numbers he needed to secure. Near the end of the evening, David called Sarah over again. This time, his voice was louder and less polite. "Why are you so slow? Can't you do your job properly?" Sarah's heart sank. She took a deep breath. "I'm doing my best, sir. It's a busy night, but I'll be with you as soon as I can." David laughed, but it was not a kind laugh. "Best? You're not good enough. Maybe this job is too hard for you." The words hit Sarah like a cold wind. She wanted to say something back, but the restaurant was full, and she didn't want to make a scene. Instead, she bowed her head and walked away. Behind her back, a few customers whispered quietly, some looking uncomfortable. Sarah could feel eyes on her, and she wished the night would end quickly. David, meanwhile, felt powerful and sure of himself, not realizing how his words would spread beyond the walls of the restaurant. He was focused on the deal and his own success, blind to the impact of his behavior. But Sarah was not alone. Her co-workers came to her after the dinner, offering quiet words of support and kindness. "Don't let him get to you," one said. "You're better than that." Sarah nodded, wiping away a tear she hadn't noticed falling. She felt small in that moment, but something inside her refused to break. As she closed the restaurant that night, Sarah didn't know that her evening had just begun. The insult from a billionaire CEO was about to reach far beyond the restaurant, changing many lives in ways she could never have imagined. The night after the dinner, Sarah sat on her small worn-out sofa at home, the soft glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. She looked at her phone but didn't want to check the messages. Her mind kept going back to the harsh words David had said to her. "Maybe this job is too hard for you." The words echoed in her head. She felt a mix of sadness and anger, but mostly, she felt small. For years, Sarah had worked hard to support her family. She had taken this job to help her younger brother go to school and to pay for her mother's medicine. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. But Sarah was strong. She wasn't going to let one bad night ruin her spirit. She looked around the small apartment, at the photos of her family on the table, and took a deep breath. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. At the restaurant the next day, the staff were quieter than usual. The story about the rude billionaire CEO had already started to spread among the employees. "I can't believe he said those things to you," said Anna, one of the waitresses. "He's supposed to be important, but he acted like a child." Sarah smiled faintly. "It's okay. I just want to do my job." Her manager, Mr. Khan, came over with a serious look. "Sarah, I heard what happened last night. If you want, we can talk to the owner about it. You don't have to face this alone." Sarah shook her head. "No, I don't want to cause trouble. It's just one person." But the story wasn't going to stay quiet. One of the customers who had been at the restaurant the night before had secretly recorded the moment when David insulted Sarah. The video showed David speaking sharply and Sarah's calm but hurt expression. That customer shared the video on social media, and soon, it began to spread like wildfire. Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, strangers, and even news outlets asking for interviews. Some people called her brave, while others shared their own stories of unfair treatment. At first, Sarah felt overwhelmed. She wasn't used to so much attention. She worried about what her family would think and whether this would affect her job. But she also felt something new, a growing feeling of support and hope. People were standing with her, reminding her that she deserved respect. Meanwhile, David's world was starting to change too. The video reached his business partners, the same people he was supposed to meet that night for the $5 billion deal. Calls began coming into his office, questions about his behavior, and concerns about how the public might react. His assistant warned him, "This is spreading fast, and it's not looking good." David was surprised. He thought his money and power would protect him. But now, it seemed like his mistake was catching up. Back at the restaurant, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. Her co-workers gathered around her during breaks, sharing stories of their own struggles and reminding her that she was not alone. "I'm proud of you," said Maria, a waitress who had worked there for years. "You didn't lose your kindness, even when he was mean." Sarah smiled, feeling a little stronger each day. She started thinking about what she wanted to say if she ever had the chance to speak out. Her brother, Amir, called her that evening. "I saw the video, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. Don't let anyone make you feel small." Sarah felt tears rise but held them back. "Thank you, Amir. I'm trying." As the days passed, the story grew bigger. News outlets interviewed Sarah, and people from around the country shared their support. Some even organized peaceful gatherings to stand against disrespect and encourage kindness. David watched all of this with growing worry. The deal he had worked so hard for was now at risk. His partners were hesitant, and his reputation was damaged. One evening, David sat alone in his office, looking at the glowing screen with comments and news stories about the incident. For the first time, he began to feel regret not just for the lost deal, but for how he had treated Sarah. He realized that no amount of money or power could protect him from the consequences of his actions. Sarah, on the other hand, was learning something important. She understood that respect was not about status or wealth, but about kindness and courage. She was no longer just a waitress, she was a voice for many who had felt invisible. That night, as she closed the restaurant, Sarah looked up at the stars outside. She whispered a quiet promise to herself, "I will keep going, no matter what." And in that moment, she felt a spark of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could change for the better. The morning after the video went viral, Sarah woke up to a flood of notifications on her phone. Messages from strangers, friends, family, and even news reporters filled her screen. She sat on her bed, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never expected that a simple night at work would turn into something so big. The video showed her calm face, her patience, and the moment when David, the billionaire CEO, insulted her without any reason. Sarah's small apartment was quiet as she scrolled through the messages. Some people called her brave, others shared stories about times when they too had been treated unfairly. Her phone rang suddenly. It was a local news channel. "We would like to interview you about what happened last night," the reporter said politely. Sarah hesitated but then agreed. She wanted to tell her story, to speak up for herself and for others like her. Later that day, Sarah sat in a small studio, the bright lights shining down on her. The reporter asked her questions, and Sarah spoke honestly, her voice steady. "I just want people to understand that everyone deserves respect," she said. "No matter who they are, or what job they have." The interview was shared widely. People from all over the country watched and shared their thoughts. Many said they were inspired by Sarah's courage. At the restaurant, the staff were proud of Sarah. They had always known she was strong, but now the whole world seemed to see it too. Anna, the waitress, said, "You showed them all that kindness and strength can stand up to anyone." Sarah smiled but also felt the weight of the attention. It was not easy being in the spotlight. She worried about what David might do next. David, meanwhile, was in a very different place. His office, once full of confidence and control, now felt cold and lonely. The video had spread faster than he could have imagined. His business partners called him with concerns. "David, this is a serious problem," one said. "People are talking about how you treated that woman. It's hurting our deal." David was frustrated. He didn't like to be questioned or challenged, especially not in public. But he also knew he had to face the situation. He called a meeting with his top advisors. "We need a plan to fix this," he said. One advisor suggested, maybe a public apology would help. David shook his head. "I don't want to admit I was wrong. That would make me look weak." But deep down, David felt a small seed of doubt. Was he really right to treat Sarah that way? The next day, the restaurant was busier than usual. Customers had come to show their support for Sarah. Some left kind notes, others brought small gifts. Sarah felt overwhelmed but grateful. She talked quietly with the people who came, thanking them for their kindness. Her manager, Mr. Khan, noticed the change. "Sarah, you've become a symbol of something bigger. People are looking to you for hope." Sarah didn't know how to respond. She was just doing her job. At home that evening, Sarah sat with her brother Amir. "This has been hard," she said softly. "But I think it's also good. Maybe people will start to change." Amir smiled proudly. "You're helping make the world better, Sarah. One step at a time." Across town, David was watching the news. He saw interviews with Sarah and the growing support for her. For the first time, he began to understand that respect was not something he could buy or demand. It was something he had to earn. That night, David sat alone in his office, thinking deeply. The deal he had hoped for was slipping away, and more than that, his reputation was damaged. He wondered if there was a way to make things right. But Sarah's story was no longer just about one bad night. It had become a movement, a reminder that every person, no matter their job or background, deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. And as Sarah looked out the window at the city lights, she knew that her life was changing. Not because of the insult, but because of the strength she found inside herself to face it. David sat in his large office, the walls lined with books and expensive art. The city lights twinkled outside the tall windows, but he barely noticed them. His mind was crowded with troubling thoughts. The video of him insulting Sarah, the waitress, had spread everywhere on TV, social media, and even in important business meetings. For the first time in a long while, David felt uneasy. His confident, almost proud attitude was replaced with worry. The $5 billion deal he had been working so hard to secure was now in danger. His business partners were losing faith. A meeting was scheduled for the next day with the investors, and David knew it would not be easy. Earlier that morning, his assistant had tried to prepare him. "Sir, the partners want to discuss the video. They're concerned about how this might affect the company's image." David nodded but said nothing. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach. As he stared at the ceiling, memories of the night at the restaurant came back: Sarah's calm face, the hurt in her eyes, and his own harsh words. He realized how badly he had acted. He was so used to being in control, to having people listen to him without question. But he had forgotten one important thing: respect is earned, not demanded. The next morning, David arrived at the meeting early. The room was filled with serious faces, some skeptical, others disappointed. One of the investors, Mr. Lee, spoke first. "David, your company has a strong reputation. But this incident is damaging. It shows a lack of respect for others, and that's a problem for our partnership." David listened quietly. He wanted to defend himself, to say the words were taken out of context. But deep inside, he knew it wouldn't help. Another investor added, "If we move forward with the deal, we need to be sure this kind of behavior won't happen again." David took a deep breath. He looked around the room and realized that the deal was not just about numbers anymore. It was about values: honesty, respect, and trust. He spoke slowly, carefully. "You're right. I was wrong to speak to that woman the way I did. I let stress and pressure make me act badly. It's not who I want to be, and it's not what this company stands for." There was silence for a moment. Then, Mr. Lee nodded. "Acknowledging the mistake is a good first step. But actions must follow words." David agreed. He promised to work on changing the company culture and himself. He knew it would not be easy, but it was necessary. After the meeting, David sat alone again. He realized he had been blind to many things: the power of kindness, the strength of quiet courage, and the damage caused by careless words. He thought about Sarah, the waitress who had shown grace under pressure. He wished he could apologize to her in person, to make amends for his harsh words. At the same time, David felt a strange sense of respect for her. She was not just a waitress. She was a person with dignity, strength, and a voice that had reached far beyond the restaurant walls. Back at the restaurant, Sarah was still dealing with the sudden attention. She received messages from people who had never met her but felt inspired by her story. Sarah knew that what happened to her was more than just an insult. It was a chance to show the world that respect mattered no matter who you were or where you worked. One day, her manager, Mr. Khan, came to her with some news. "Sarah, the owner of the restaurant wants to meet you. They want to show support for what you've been through." Sarah was surprised but agreed. She wasn't sure what to expect. The meeting was simple but meaningful. The owner thanked Sarah for her professionalism and courage. "We're proud of how you handled everything," the owner said. "You've reminded us all about the importance of respect and kindness." Sarah smiled, feeling a little lighter. Meanwhile, David was preparing to take the next steps. He scheduled meetings with his team to talk about respect, inclusion, and kindness. He wanted the company to change, to be better than before. He also thought about reaching out to Sarah personally. He wasn't sure how she would respond, but he knew it was something he had to do. The story of the billionaire CEO and the waitress had changed many things. For Sarah, it was a reminder of her own strength. For David, it was a moment of deep reflection and a chance to grow. And for the world watching, it was a lesson that respect is a powerful force, and no one is above it. Days passed since the video of David's insult went viral, and Sarah found herself at the center of a storm she never expected. The attention was overwhelming, but through it all, Sarah stood tall. At the restaurant, she continued to work her shifts with a quiet determination. Every customer she served, every smile she gave, was a reminder that kindness could shine even in the darkest moments. Her co-workers watched her closely, admiring her calm and strength. Anna said to her one day, "Sarah, I don't know how you do it. You stayed so calm when things were so hard." Sarah smiled gently. "I just want to do the right thing. I want to show that no matter what happens, we can choose kindness." Outside the restaurant, Sarah's story continued to inspire many. She was invited to speak at a small community event, where people gathered to hear her talk about respect and courage. Sarah stood in front of the crowd, her voice soft but strong. "I never wanted to be famous," she said. "I just wanted to be treated with respect, like everyone else. What happened to me is a reminder that kindness matters. It can change lives." The audience listened quietly, many wiping tears from their eyes. Sarah's words reached them deeply because they were real and honest. Back at the restaurant, Sarah's family was proud but also worried. Her mother asked gently, "Are you sure you want to do this? The attention can be hard." Sarah nodded. "I want to help others. If my story can make a difference, then it's worth it." Her younger brother, Amir, smiled proudly. "You're my hero, Sarah." Meanwhile, the world outside continued to watch. Social media buzzed with support for Sarah, and many shared their own stories of kindness and courage. But Sarah's strength was tested again when she received a message from David's company. They wanted to arrange a meeting. David himself wanted to speak with her. Sarah thought about it carefully. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she also felt that facing this moment could be important for her and for everyone watching. On the day of the meeting, Sarah arrived at a large office building, feeling nervous but determined. She was greeted politely and led into a quiet conference room. David was already there, sitting at the table with a serious expression. When Sarah entered, he stood up and offered a small, respectful smile. "Sarah," he began, "I want to thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I have had time to think about what happened, and I realize now how wrong I was." Sarah listened carefully, watching his eyes. There was something different about him now, less arrogance, more humility. David continued, "I am sorry for the way I spoke to you. No one deserves to be treated like that. I've learned a lot from this, and I want to make things right. Sarah nodded slowly. Thank you for your apology. It means a lot. But it's not just about words. It's about respect, how we treat each other every day. David agreed. You're right. I want to do better, not just for you, but for everyone in my company. They talked for a while longer, about respect, kindness, and the future. Sarah shared some ideas about how companies can create better environments for everyone. After the meeting, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but this moment was a start. Back at the restaurant, her co-workers welcomed her warmly. Anna smiled and said, "You handled that so well. You're making a difference." Sarah smiled, feeling grateful for the support around her. That night, as she walked home, Sarah thought about the journey she had been on. From a difficult insult to a movement of hope, she had found strength she didn't know she had. She looked up at the stars shining brightly above and whispered, "This is just the beginning." After her meeting with David, Sarah felt a new sense of hope. For the first time, she believed that things could actually change, not just for herself, but for many others. David kept his promise. He began working with his team to create a new plan for the company, one focused on respect, kindness, and fairness. They started by organizing training sessions for all employees about treating others with dignity. At first, some employees were unsure. They were used to a strict, often harsh environment where only results mattered. But as David shared his story, and the reason for the change, more people began to listen. Meanwhile, Sarah's life was changing too. She was invited to speak at schools and community centers, where she talked about the power of kindness and standing up for what is right. One day, Sarah was invited to a big conference about business and social responsibility. She stood in front of hundreds of people and shared her story. "I was just doing my job when I was treated unfairly," she said. "But I learned that we all have the power to speak up and make a difference. Kindness can change lives if we let it." Her words received a warm applause. Sarah felt proud, not because she was famous, but because she was helping others find their own strength. Back at the restaurant, Sarah's co-workers noticed a change in the way people treated her. Customers came not only for the food but to support her and hear her story. Her manager, Mr. Khan, told her, "You've brought new energy to this place. People are inspired by you." Sarah smiled but stayed humble. "I'm just happy to do my best." At the same time, David faced challenges. Some in his company resisted the changes. They worried that kindness and respect might make the business weaker or slower. David had to work hard to convince them that respect was not a weakness but a strength. "A company that cares about its people will be stronger," he told his team. Slowly, the culture began to shift. Employees felt more valued and motivated. David also reached out to Sarah's restaurant to offer support, including training for staff and better resources. Sarah was surprised but pleased. She knew that real change took time, but this was a good start. One afternoon, Sarah's younger brother Amir came to visit her at work. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah," he said. "You've shown everyone what courage looks like." Sarah smiled. "It's not just me. It's everyone who believes in respect and kindness." That evening, Sarah sat on her small balcony, looking at the city lights. She thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. Her phone buzzed with messages of support, but also with invitations to speak at more events and join new projects about social justice and equality. Sarah felt tired but excited. She was no longer just a waitress, she was a voice for many who wanted to be heard. Across town, David watched the news about Sarah's speeches and community work. He realized that the lesson he had learned was bigger than any business deal. One night, David wrote a letter to Sarah. He thanked her again for teaching him about respect and courage. He promised to keep working to make his company better. Sarah read the letter carefully. She felt a sense of closure but also a new beginning. The story of the billionaire CEO and the waitress had become more than a news headline. It had become a symbol of change, proof that even small acts of kindness and courage can ripple out to touch many lives. And for Sarah and David, it was a reminder that respect and understanding are the true keys to success. Months had passed since the night that changed everything for Sarah and David. The world had watched as a simple act of courage sparked a wave of kindness and respect that reached far beyond their lives. Sarah stood in front of a large crowd at a community center. This time, she wasn't just telling her story, she was sharing the lessons she had learned. "Respect is something everyone deserves," she said, her voice calm but full of strength. "It's not about where you work or how much money you have. It's about seeing each other as human beings." The room was full of people from all walks of life, students, business leaders, and everyday workers, all listening carefully. Back in the city, David sat in his office, watching a live stream of Sarah's speech. He felt a deep sense of pride and humility. He remembered how angry and defensive he had been at first, and how much he had to learn. David had continued to lead his company with a new focus on kindness and respect. The changes were not always easy, but they had made the company stronger and more respected. One day, David decided to visit Sarah again, not as a CEO or a powerful man, but as someone who wanted to learn and grow. He arrived at the restaurant during a busy lunch hour. Sarah greeted him with a smile, and the staff watched quietly, sensing something important was happening. David looked at Sarah and said, "Thank you for everything you taught me. You changed more than my words, you changed my heart." Sarah nodded. "It's never too late to learn. And it's never too late to be kind." Their meeting was simple but powerful. It showed that change could come from understanding and respect. Outside the restaurant, life went on. Sarah continued working, speaking, and inspiring others. She had become a symbol of hope and courage in her community. Her family was proud, but they reminded her to stay humble and true to herself. David's company grew stronger too, not just in business but in spirit. They became known as a company that cared about employees, customers, and the community. The story of the billionaire CEO and the waitress became more than just a news story. It became a lesson for many about respect, kindness, and the power of standing up for what is right. One evening, Sarah stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. She thought about the journey from hurt and anger to hope and change. She smiled softly, knowing that this was only the beginning. Because kindness, respect, and courage were not just words, they were a way of life. And Sarah was ready to live it every day.